The people who are the most impressive, the most amazing, they're just like all of us. But what's the difference? The difference is what's inside of them. It's their attitude, it's their heart, it's their vision, it's their care factor. And when I got to meet Peter 7, 8, 10 years ago, he was a bigger-than-life developer, and immediately I felt like we'd been kindred spirits our whole life. I think the first thing he said to me at lunch was, "Thank God you and I didn't meet each other in my heyday. We'd have been in a lot of trouble." So I titled today, Making Big Believable, and I'm going to let Peter start by just sharing some of his story, because it's absolutely amazing how it has spanned so many decades and touched so many personalities and big things. But the reason I came up with this title today is I have never met a visionary like this man. He sees things around corners that people can't even imagine exist. And even more impressive is he has the fortitude to actually see them through. His projects are measured in decades, not in years. And when he thinks about something and lays something out, the first time you hear it, you're like, this guy's lost his mind, it'll never work. But by the time you spend an hour with him, he's got you ready to sign on the dotted line with him. That's who he is. So I think he's got a wonderful story to tell, a lot of color that he can shed on life, and a lot of scars along the way as well. But Peter, I'm gonna interject as you go, because your story could carry us into next year's event. But
All right.
start with telling the story, and I'll pop in with some things I want you to highlight throughout.
All right. I'm a good storyteller generally, and I've had a lot of things I've done. But I thought I saw so many things in the speeches that have gone on in the talks that I've actually touched. Those are touch points in my life. And so I thought I'd go back and kind of give you a little history of myself. My father, after World War II, came back after the war, and he wanted to live in the country, so he maybe overdid that a little bit. We lived in the country. I was born, actually. They moved into the house. I was born shortly after that. In my first grade, there was 3 people. In my second grade, there were 4. And you moved a row over, grades 1 through 5 were in one room, and then the other room was the rest of the grades. It was 2-room schoolhouse, outdoor plumbing, and this is in south of Buffalo, New York, right in the middle of the snow belt. So you actually had the outhouse right over top of a little stream that then flowed into Buffalo Creek. So you don't have to worry about having that pumped out. But when I was 7, my father, well, first off, I lived in an area where we were told everybody around me was a farmer. And they had, so if you want to have a friend and you want to play at all, you better help with the chores or you're never going to do it. So in the morning, I'd milk cows, help my friend milk cows, and not, this is when I don't remember not doing that. And then when you get home after, if you were in sports, you could kind of dodge that bullet sometime. None of the kids that had farms could enroll in sports because they had to go work. But, so I'm giving my generation now. I actually drove 2 horses, Queenie and May. There were 2 Clydesdales, because the farm that I worked at, where Rick Munn was, they didn't have a tractor. So we had 2 horses. That's pretty primitive. 7 years old, my father buys a summer home, summer home. That's really a misnomer. It was a cottage in the middle of a campground, and we had dirt roads, and this was in Canada on a place called Long Point. And because I worked all the time, I got really bored really quick when we were there, because there was, people like laying on the beach or maybe fishing, and I like to fish, but can't do that because I wasn't allowed to drive the boat. So anyway, I ended up getting paper routes. I had the Toronto Star, Star Weekly, and Brantford Expositor, and I would deliver that on a campground. And when I did, because all the little kids are bored too, they'd be following me around. So I gradually, by the end of that summer, I employed all those kids, and I just dropped the papers off, and then I had them all zoned out, and I got 3.25 cents a paper, and I kept 1 1/4 and gave them 2 cents a paper. Minimum wage was 62 cents an hour for an adult at that point. That, after the papers were all delivered, I got bored, and I kind of worked at the candy counter at Bushel Store up the corner. And then I learned that one of the really best things that happened to me, that I watched people go by and pick up little change purses that we sold, and they never bought them because they were terrible. I mean, they were stupid, actually. They were upside down kind of a thing. But I mentioned it was made by Port Rowan Home for the Blind. That And then I watched it, but half the people would come back and buy one. So I took all my savings from the paper that year and the next year, and I bought every change purse I could. I stamped it Port Rowan Home for the Blind. I put price tag, we were selling them for 70 cents or 75 cents. I priced them all $1.25, and I sold them to the kids that delivered the newspapers for $1. Their dad would stake them with $1. Nobody's going to say no to a 5-year-old selling Port Rowan Home for the Blind change purses. And I literally sold thousands of them, and I made, so here I am, 9 years old, and I'm making a lot of money, and I did this 2 years in a row. And I then, in the afternoons, because I still had, that was all happening in the morning, I ended up delivering ice, because the guy would let me drive the truck. That led to by my 11th year, I'd taken all my savings, and the bushel store, I got him to loan me land, or give me land, and I convinced him that if I put the ice house there, if I built an ice house, now I am 10 years old. If I paid for an ice house, and we built it there, more people would come to a store, and I had all these strippings from all the papers, which means you have all, what they did is we never knew who was going to get a paper, so they always gave you extras. So we had mountains of papers, set up all this, after they were stripped, where you take the title off of them. Anyway, long story short, we had an ice house going. I still had the concession for that stuff, and I made thousands of dollars as a kid, and a Volkswagen was under $1,000. So my mother was crying, my dad was happy. Unfortunately, this work ethic has really caused me some difficulty too, because I don't really have a lot of happy memories about college, which all of you get up and talk about. I just don't have them, because I worked all the way through school. But I will go on. I'm 12 years old, same time we had this money, I made a decision that I was going to move to Florida. And the reason I gave my mother was the women were prettier in Florida than they were in Buffalo. And then I won't go into the other things why they were prettier. But it really had to do with Family Circle magazine, which was the only magazine we had in the house. So on that course, I went to Cornell, and I went to hotel school. I lied on an application I knew what I was doing about running an NCR machine. Ended up getting a job in my later years as a night auditor. Had to literally hire the guy from NCR, hire him for 2 days to teach me how to run the machine. So before I got the job, because I said I knew how to do it. 2 weeks after I get there, the manager dies, and I'm asked to be the general manager. So the last bit of school was I was general manager of a hotel, trying to go to school full time and sleeping in the hallways. So that's one of the reasons I don't have a whole lot of great memories with that. When I got out of school, I moved to Florida. As predicted, only interview with companies would take me there. I ended up running food and beverage at Busch Gardens, and I ran into August Busch III, who I think everybody knows that connection. That's their company. And he was horrible. He was mean to people, and he actually walked into a full restaurant that we had and told me I had 10 minutes to get everybody out because he wanted the whole place to himself, and he had a couple of friends with him, let's put it that way. So I had to stage a fake gas leak to empty the restaurant and hand everybody a free dinner, and they all got out, but that was the day I decided I'm out of here. And that was only like 30 days into my career with Budweiser. Excuse me. But then everything has a good reason. A week before that event happened, when I decided I'm going to get as far away from this man as I can, we had a YPO event. That's my first exposure to YPO, but I'm hosting the part, not hosting it, but it's actually being at this restaurant. One of the guests, a gentleman named Jerome, was there, and he didn't have a date. I didn't ask why. He found out I was from Cornell, and he followed me around through the whole evening asking me questions because he was about to build a restaurant. The following week, I got a phone call from him and asked if I'd meet him in Miami. By the way, this story is going somewhere. That was all linked together eventually. So anyway, I said, sure, if you fly the ticket, I fly to Miami. He picks me up and we go straight to a men's store because I think he was worried I was so flammable with my polyester. He was scared to take me to any place that had open candles. So I got a whole new wardrobe, and then that weekend ended up 2 weeks later, I get another call, can you fly to New York to meet me? And so I say yes. There we go. I got the new clothes on that he gave me. I'm thinking I'm really hot. We go to the St. Regis. He walks across the street to Dunhill's and he buys me a whole new wardrobe, this time spending about twice the amount of 2 Volkswagens worth of clothes, which was shocking to me. And I remember I'm a country boy, and I'm going to all these places, and all these movie stars and all these people. Well, that led to him wanting to get something that he said, listen, my brother and I just bought some land, and what do you know about development? And I said, well, not really a whole lot. My dad was an engineer. I mean, I had saved Jerome. He was about to build that restaurant, which was a floating restaurant. I showed him why it was a bad idea, and I don't think anybody's ever told this guy, ever disagreed with him. Well, I did, and I said, I just don't think it's a good idea, and I showed him the reasons why, blah, blah. Anyway, got 500 acres. He said, what we want to do is we want to have a golf course, we want to do residential, we want to have some commercial, and we want to have everything on this 500 acres. Up to that date, and it's amazing, up to that time, everybody had literally put shopping here, golf course here, residential here, and hadn't blended it all together. His brother, his younger brother, very clever, good designer, at least conceptually, he thought about this, and we literally, in the office, laid out a golf course with residential, townhouses, single-family lots, commercial on the street, blah, blah, blah. We actually created a mixed-use community. That project, Bay Meadows in Jacksonville, you can all look it up, was the #1 first PUD cover of Urban Land Institute magazine, okay? So I get asked sometimes, because I'm typically in big projects, my first project was a fairly big project, 500 acres on a couple thousand. I think it was like 1,500 or 2,000 units on it by the time we were done with apartments and everything. Then we bought up, Highway 280 goes in Birmingham, and built a project called Inverness. Some of you may know that in Birmingham. Stonebridge in Memphis. And then we bought 8,000 acres. I didn't buy it. He put the money up. We had 8,000 acres going in Ponte Vedra, which is at the coast. And coupled with that, the company that we formed, this development company, had some pretty interesting board members. Sam Zell was one of them. Jay Pritzker, the father who formed Hyatt, was also on it. So here I am, I'm 22 years old, and I'm meeting, and I'm running the company. I'm COO of a company, and I've got those 2 guys on my board. So it kind of all came, I have to say, it just kind of all came in stride. I didn't really think about it a lot. But we were producing, we did about, in 4 years, I think we did 3,000 apartments. And those days, the RIAT money was ridiculously easy to get. A little background for those that don't know, I think I keep forgetting how old I am because many of you don't experience the REIT thing. Banks had gone through a metamorphosis that had to do with coming out of World War II and then what they could lend and their degree of sophistication or lack thereof. The country had grown with lots of little towns, smaller banks versus just the big money center banks. And what happened was they didn't have the expertise to make the lending to meet up with the demands of the country in all these little towns and growth that was going on with the interstate system and the Eisenhower Act of 1953. So they all started, REITs were formed, and they're different than they are today, what you know them as. That REIT, Real Estate Investment Trust, basically the banks put money in, this group of supposed experts would lend it out. Unfortunately, one big flaw. They were generally paid at how much money they put out, not how much money they made. And the most cockamamie deals you ever saw in your life were being funded. In 1974, Madrone walked into my office and said, sell everything. And this is where negative things turn into positive things, where I'm going with this. Sell everything, a list of 31 projects. If you get that number on the project, don't come me, just sell it. Well, I fought it because we just built this huge company. We had our architects, we have engineers, we have a staff, we got 31 projects going. And he said, just stop, sell it. So anyway, in the sale, as we went, because he was right, it collapsed so fast Everybody went down. Of the top 20 developers in the country, only 2 survived. One of them was this company. I had 11 bankrupt general contractors. Not necessarily bankrupt, they were just broke. What happened is that they'd taken more money as they could get out of draws. Most of them all had overdrawn. And I ended up having to live for 4 days in a hotel room with a guy that taught the construction course to get me through an exam so I could get a contractor's license. And then I proceeded for 6 months to live in my car. My wife at the time sent me my luggage, and I would trade suitcases back and forth. So I got luggage, and I bathed in the apartment, in the model units. We had condos and apartments, and so that was a horrible, horrible time. That was the last half of 1975, with the problem starting in late 74. When it was all done, Jerome, I said, well, now what are we going to do? We got that all done. By the way, I hadn't taken a paycheck in months and months. But he got his money back. We closed off the last deals, and he said, I'm just not going to do anything more. I almost lost everything. And so this is where things, I thought it was about the lowest day, I think, in my life to work that hard and have it just end. And I literally didn't have time to feel bad. I don't know, all I knew was I hadn't made a mortgage payment. I had 4 mortgages stacked up. Even my realtor had loaned me back my commission that I paid her when I bought the house. And I held an 8-acre estate on the St. Johns River, and again, now I'm 27, 28, and I got 4 mortgages in the house, and I don't have a paycheck anymore. So I set up in one of the bedrooms, put a phone up, a table, and I started calling all the banks that I had dealt with. And this is where bad news turns into good news. Every one of those banks, just about from Chase Manhattan, MetLife, Connecticut General, Cabot and Forbes, and several others, even Gridley Bank of London, all gave me the real estate they were getting back in what they called real estate swaps. The REITs had gone broke, and what they did is they distributed the assets that they lent on, whether it be a mortgage position or a fee position. They distributed those back to the bank, and they already took a hit on this thing, but now they own this property. They didn't know what to do with the first place. That's why they hired RITs, so they had to have people to run them. So within 90 days, I think Met turned over 1,200 units to us to manage. We had about 15 construction sites, office buildings, and suddenly I went from 0 employees to hundreds. I mean, it was a mad scramble. And I had been in 1972 when I worked for Jerome, in watching the migration. I got close to Ed Ball. Ed Ball was the head of the DuPont estate. And as head of that, he was the one that turned down Walt Disney, who wanted to have the land between Panama City and Destin, and he didn't want to deal with a carny, which was, I didn't think about the fact that he did that to Walt. What I thought about was trying to figure out why Walt wanted to be there. And the reason they did is the interstate system and drivability, single-day traffic, and it was the only place they could get together 10 to 15,000 acres. I had been dealing with Ed Ball, buying land, and some of that 8,000 acres, which I negotiated in Ponte Vedra, came from him. And of course, I wasn't spending my money, I was spending Jerome's money, or the company's money. But I think what happened was, and by the way, a little quick story, Ed Ball lived in a 2-bedroom unit in the Mayflower Hotel, a 1-room hotel room, twin beds in the Mayflower Hotel. And I'd sit on one bed, he'd sit on the other twin bed, he'd have a bottle of bourbon here, and we had to drink shots while we're talking, sitting on 2 single beds in this room. I didn't drink. You ever try to drink when you don't drink? It's like fire water. So I was trying to keep from choking. But anyway, that's an aside. But that's how, in 1972, after doing this stuff, I came to Destin for the first time. I-10 was not built. I drove down Highway 90, came in over the bridge in from Fort Walton, and had the most beautiful sight I'd ever seen. Jerome used to go to Bahamas. Of course, I always went with him. So I had some feel for this unbelievable place where I loved the water was so clear in the Bahamas and all this. But I came over that bridge, and the tide was in, and the white sand, there was no houses on Holiday Isle, and it was spectacular. And I made a commitment to myself. There's a big chunk of land as soon as you come in the town. I don't know how big it was, but I always tend to buy bigger sites. And I'm on my way, by the way, to meet a realtor at the land that is now Sandestin. So what happened then is I made a commitment. I sat there for about 30 minutes sitting on a park bench, made a commitment that I would work on this land until it was gone. Gone to me is someone puts a restaurant or a building on it, and then the building's going to sit there for another 10 years until you can afford to tear the building down. And those land values got to go that much because it would have been, and the whole place could have easily had land squandered. We've all seen great piece of property with crap old buildings put on them or underutilized, and you almost, but it jams the price so high it doesn't make economic sense. Anyway, I'll end on this. I didn't get that property. 19 years of calling every single month, I finally got that property. But in the meantime, after I left there, because I didn't get it then, I drove to Gulf Shores. And at that point, I was just looking along that whole coastline between really Gulf Shores to Panama City, which is really the only quality white sand in that whole area, and the North Gulf of America. So I bought the 5 miles of beachfront in Gulf Shores and planned a new project there. Went through all the way through the master planning, through the thing. And as we were getting our permit, the state and the federal government condemned it. The state condemned it, and the government bought it. That's now Gulf Shores National Park. So that ended at that point. That was about 1974. And then again, I left Fletcher in end of 75. So I started my company, I had all these things going. Well, one of the banks I represented was the Chase Bank. Chase had foreclosed on a developer who had actually bought a key piece of the Sandestin tract. And it was a piece that I wanted because it had been dredged by the Corps of Engineers out so they could bring the rockets they captured in World War II and launch them out over the Gulf of Mexico. So I already had a harbor and the beach. So I ended up that piece was already bought by a Dutchman. I tried to go meet him. I finally was leaving on a plane because I couldn't get a meeting with him, so I bribed the ticket agent and the ticket to have this guy escorted into the pilot's briefing room at the small little airport that Fort Walton had at that point. Fortunately, he was a Dutchman, and I introduced myself as Boos. Oh, Dutch, Boos. So he said he's going to California, and he doubled back after he bought some other stuff in California. On his way back, we handshook on the deal. We had a written partnership in a week, and a year later, I bought him out. And then acquired what brings Sandestin up to 2,450 acres. So back doing other projects, in addition to running all these bank assets, we were running, building our own stuff. The first project I bought in Jacksonville was the same year I started the company with 200 and some acres called Lake Mandarin. But the next thing that happened to me that is just absolutely dumb luck is that MetLife, one of the companies I represented, I told you I had 1,200 of their units. The president of that division, I don't think he was president of the parent, offered me that he would give them to me if I made this revenue just enough to cover their debt service with no guarantees and no cash. So all these units were deeded to me. And of course, that was a bonanza because these things were, I don't know what the total value was, 30 million, 25 million, 30, something like that. And they just deeded them to me, and subject to their mortgage, of course. And of course, the first thing I did was sell one so I could make payroll. So, but it was a great asset, a great start. And so I think the point is adversity can really bring some things, and also don't overlook the opportunities, whether it be little kids are running around, how can I use these kids to help sell papers and sell something else? Or look at things that you're right in front of you that are buying and selling. We converted keychains to stuff. Or the fact that I was delivering ice so I could drive a truck, but realized ice is something you don't need to deliver, they'll come get it. You got to have ice. And at that point, everybody had ice. So that's why I built the ice house, and that thing, it did really well. Okay.
So connecting the dots there, as a visionary, would you say something that was inherently born into you, or something that was created over time, or how did you kind of fuel that inside of you to take it to the level that it is now?
I don't think I have any particularly great asset, except that I like working. I mean, as a kid, I worked all the time. I mean, I take a break and go fishing on a dock or something, but it was fun for me. But it wasn't about the money. It was kind of fun for me, organization, all the kids running around and people, and my mother crying because she thinks it's awful I've got this money, and my dad thinks that's amazing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, Sam Zell's got a quote in his book that you don't do the deals for the money. You do them for the wheeling and dealing, for the fun. The money's just a way to keep score. Yeah, and you today at 80, I mean, you still make me look like I'm patient and prudent. I mean, every time I talk to you, it's something else. Yeah, so what is that for you? Is it just the addiction to the game? Is it just a passion? Childhood trauma you're trying to fill a hole for? I mean, you would think with everything that you've accomplished and having somebody like Miss Terry at your side and access to the things and people and everything else, there'd be some slowdown in you. And every time we talk, it's something new that you're fired up about, that you can't wait to sink your teeth in. And these deals that we're talking about are 10-year deals on the shortest horizon, okay? This isn't I'm buying a stock today and I'm selling it tomorrow.
It's just fun for me. I don't know how to say it. Before Legendary Marine was created because I tried to lease. I built the dry storage in Destin, and I offered $1 a month just to have a lease for someone, any boat guy in that area, to put his dealership there, and I built him a showroom, and nobody would take it because they're not going to sell. We're not going to sell cruising boats as a fishing community. So I started Legendary Marine in 2001, and in 2011 or 2012, we won #1 boat dealer in North America, and we won it again in 2002, and I took it public in 20. So but I never had the intentions to be in the boat business. Mm-hmm. And similar thing happened, by the way, in the quilting business. When my dad died, my mother was bored, so she had a friend that had a quilting machine. She said, "Can we get one?" I said, "Sure," but I ended up getting 5, and I got the contract with Saks Fifth Avenue to do all their quilting for all their quilted works, and then we were doing Gilbert casket liners as well. I didn't bargain on this, so we sold that company. So.
One of my more disheartening days as a real estate developer was when I first was becoming close with Peter, and he was probably 70. And in my mind, Peter was as successful and wealthy as any real estate developer I'd ever met. And we were talking about a deal, and he's like, "Where are we going to get the money?" I'm like, "What do you mean? You're the one that's got the money. I mean, I'm not any help here." And he's like, "Oh, man, you're going to learn that you're always looking for the money. If you're going to be a real estate developer, you're always going to need money every single day. It's just more zeros at the end of it." And I'm like, "Oh, that's wonderful. So I have that to look forward to." And he's like, "Till the day you die." And as my kids always ask, "Well, when do we not owe money?" I was like, when your mom and I give it to y'all. That's when we're done, when we assign the debt to the next generation. So, like on that same lens, you've had some near massive wipeouts to where everything you'd built, everything you'd worked for, was gone because the chips are always still out on the table in your world. And I think that's a powerful message to share with the group. So, tell a few of those, whether it's, what's happened with Harbor Walk. And I don't know if y'all caught that, but Harbor Walk is the one right when you come over the bridge into Destin, the beautiful condo, hotel, mixed-use development right there on your right. Peter wanted that property for 19 years before he ever got a hold of it. That development is still ongoing today. So you first saw it in 1972 or 74?
72.
All right, 1972. Here we are in 2026. He's about to build a what, $50 million parking garage?
We've got a $76 million parking garage.
A $76 million parking garage.
$150 million hotel, and I pre-sold 86 units.
All right, so started working on that in 1972, and here we are in 2026 with still another decade ahead of him just to finish that project out. But talk about, when 08 hit, and how that one almost wiped you out.
Which one?
Harbor Walk.
Oh, Harbor Walk, yeah, Harbor Walk. Harbor Walk is it took a long time to get, and it's a story when I bought it, so I'll come back to that in a minute. But answering this question, that building, when it was done, it was the largest single-phase residential project ever done at that moment in time in all of Florida, bigger than anything in Miami or Fort Lauderdale. It's 728 bedrooms big. It's, so anyway, we had the job of pre-selling it, and when I'll tell you a story about greed. This is an important one here. When once I had enough sales, I had about $190 million in debt on it. And once I had enough pre-sales to pay off that, I stopped because prices were going up. Everything was buying. People were in lines actually buying. I sold the building 3 floors at a time, which means you had to get the penthouse, you had to buy the bottom one, you trade in for the next group, trade in for the next one, and to get the ultimate. What it meant was when the music finally did stop, and by the way, we returned over 100 contracts, let's put it that way, because we weren't going to sell the thing out. The music stopped so fast in the recession in 07, 08, or 09, and we ended up, it was only a matter of time because we weren't going to be able to pay off the mortgage. And so I went looking for a partner. Well, a lot of people lost their money in Destin area, in the C30A area, and lots that were $600,000 in water, not in Seaside, but in that area, on the C30A, it was several places anyway. $600,000 lots went for as low as $25,000. It was crazy. Well, a lot of people from the financial markets in New York and Delaware and Boston, et cetera, lost a lot of money, and literally we got what's called red circled. So I couldn't even get anybody, even the grave dancers weren't going to talk to anybody in that whole area. They wouldn't talk about it. So I asked our team to say, give me a list of the top 10 people, if we have 10, that love the place and have already bought units. The first person I talked to, I laid out a deal he couldn't refuse, but it meant we could pay off the balance. The balance at that point was like 64 million or something. So, and very few people can write a check for 64 million. Fortunately, this individual could. We wrote the check. Great partner, but that partner got him getting a divorce, and as his brother said, who was also in the deal with him, this is bad news for both of us, and it sure turned out that way. So I ended up with a partner, and I don't think there's really anything I could have done or written in a document to protect me from this. And someone, I just don't, Nathan asked me that question, what would you have done differently? I got to say probably nothing. But in this case, it became priority one for me to end that partnership. And he ended up making a lot of money because I bought him out and now have back 100% of it. But it was great for a couple of years, but then it turned into a thing I dreaded.
And you've had some very high-profile partners over the course of your career. Like, what has worked really well in your partnerships, and what has been the downfall? Because you got some scars on that end too.
I've got to say that it isn't. You can write documents, and I have really good attorney. In fact, my attorney, I didn't realize how good he was until I checked it's Hubbard. What's the name of it? Was the guide that lists attorneys in the European version. Anyway, he's the top 50 lawyers in the United States, and he represents the largest pension fund there and everything else in their real estate, billion-dollar buildings. And I didn't even know he does that. It's like the Chinese wall. But anyway, great attorney. Documents are always great. Be very clear on who has voting control. You don't get yourself outnumbered on that side. Don't create a default for yourself against where they don't default. I mean, it's a company default, but you can build some defenses into your document. At least you can, if you got a crazy partner that's trying to take you out or control, if nothing else, you can get to a stalemate condition if you can't get voting control. So some of those things, and anybody ever wants to talk to me about that, I can get into more detail on it rather than trying to explain it here. But you can all have my number. Nathan's got it. You're welcome to have it and give me a call. But I think the biggest thing is who you're dealing with. Personalities matter. I mean, Nathan and I are partners, and I trust him implicitly. I don't even have to. I mean, we call each other out of courtesy, whatever we're going to do, but the reality is that you have to have a fundamental trust. So really, really, really try to get people that are people as opposed to institutions. I have been really fortunate that I passed up many a deal by not going to Wall Street to get the money. You know, I'd rather deal with individuals or private funds or people that could care and had a face and a name and an interest in what I was doing. And the other thing is, fortunately for me, and my whole life has basically switched around since with Sandestin and on, is that I only build buildings that are fun, meaning I build resorts. I build things where I want people to be aspirational about it. I want emotion in the buildings. I get my jollies out of watching the kids run through pop-up fountains. And and we had 25,000 people checked into Sandestin last year. 25 on 4th of July. That's a guess. That's you're in a lot of family albums. You're starting a lot of families. There's a whole lot of memories that are tied to stuff that I built, and that means a lot to me.
Yeah, I mean, I use the expression, how you do anything is how you do everything all the time. Peter takes it to a whole nother level. You go ride through one of his developments, and he will stop and explain to you why the park bench is facing that direction, because in October at 4:30, the sun is going to set over that tree, and he's moved it 37 times. And Greg's going, no, actually, he moved it 118. Yeah, I know how many times he moved the park bench. And I'll sit here and be like, Peter, we just got to get started. And he's like, no, we got to get it right. Yeah, and that is one of the things that I have taken away from him that's been such a powerful lesson, for me. And Peter, at this chapter of your life, and I'm not going to say it's at the end because I don't think you're ever going to die, but, looking back over your years, is there a certain time period that you remember being the most fulfilled?
Well, I think that I guess the best I think is that I fulfilled is that I've gone back to the projects I built. Inverness is a good example, and it's spectacular. I go through Sandestin today, which I don't own any longer. In fact, the day I sold it, and I kept, by the way, the development rights for 5 years, which I was at, because I could, and I restricted it from being broken up. What made Sandestin special? And so this day, because my bank had gone broke, I got an insurance company in as my partner. Let me back up a little bit. Sorry. You asked for a high point. I think what I did, I can talk about I don't have many super high. I think I'm always high.
Yeah.
So I don't have anything that really jumps out at me, but I've avoided my down points. I've tried to find positives. Sandestin was something I never wanted to sell. My bank went broke. I had a limited amount of time. They wouldn't even sign releases I had 60-some lot sales and stuff, and they couldn't. People had built houses, and all of a sudden they found that they're getting foreclosed because the ground lease had never been paid. Even the money was sent to the bank, it never got signed. So anyway, then I got an insurance company, and 4 days before the closing, the insurance commissioner took them over, and so they lost that. And I had a project Topsail I had bought, and I put that with the insurance company. So I lost Topsail. So I'm pretty down, but the good news was I signed this deed at 10 o'clock in the morning on Sandestin sale, and I bought the land after 19 years at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Yeah. Same.
So I asked Mr. Stimson where Mobile was in 2050 and Billy where the world was. I'm going to ask you, where's the Gulf Coast? Where is this entire region spanning from Panama City to Mississippi Gulf Coast? You've been a visionary for this whole area. Where does it go from here over the next 25 years?
Well, pretty much all my career, I've been following what I learned regarding the interstate system and transportation and access. When I built the Hilton in Sandestin, there was no hotel comps, and this is what's going to tell what I used here, and the reason I'm going into this, it gives understanding. Nobody knew where Destin was. Nobody knew nobody knew that area. Nobody knew the North Gulf Coast from mountains except for people that used their backyard beach. I mean, it was good. Montgomery knew about it. Birmingham knew about it. New Orleans, but that's not the whole Southeast, and that's certainly no Central United States or Eastern United States. So in 1970, I bought, I finally got control of it and owned it in 78, and 79. 1980, I had a broker-dealer's license already, securities dealer, and I had a real estate license. So 1 week a month for over a year, I traveled 3 cities a day with Merrill Lynch, and I was part of a group. I spoke on real estate investing and tax. I studied tax. I was pretty good in my tax law. And I spoke on that, and other people talk about estates and planning and securities and whatever else they talked about. And I frantically hand out cards about Destin. And so what really turned Destin around was the fact that, it takes a long time for a community to develop if you're waiting for people to come, because people don't vacation the first time on their own nickel. They typically are invited somewhere, a convention or something, never see it. Nobody had ever seen Destin, and we had to get a hotel done, and I ended up selling the Hilton that Merrill Lynch allowed me to sell to their customers. So I got 400 customers, sold $72 million of sales in 28 days. I mean, you only needed 50. Yeah. So, but what does it, and what's going to happen here is, that's where I really realized it, because what convinced Merrill Lynch to do that is when I went up, I had to go, they turned it down. I called and I said, I knew who turned it down. They said he was out. When I called, he said he was out. I said, I'll hold. I held for 4 hours. Okay? Finally, this guy gets out and he said, you've been holding all this time? I said, yeah, it's important. He said, what's important? I said, you're the fellow that turned down the Stan Destin deal. He said, yeah. And I said, obviously we failed. We failed to give you all the facts or you wouldn't have turned it down. And how do I get the facts? He said, from me. Anyway, I ended up, I said, from me. And he said, well, can you be here tomorrow? I said, sure. What time? He said, 2. He said, where are you? I said, I'm in Destin. He said, how are you going to get here? I said, no idea. So he laughed. And the next week I went back up meeting all of his group. But what he drilled me on was actually but I'm going to answer what's going to happen. I went through the fact there's 3,000 miles of shoreline on the east coast of the United States. Nearly all of it is barrier islands, but beaches all the way down. Yeah. On the Gulf Coast, on the Gulf of America, you basically have almost 3,000 miles of shoreline again, except only 240 miles of it's beach, and has beaches. You have the mangrove swamps on one side, on the inside of Florida, and then you have Mississippi Delta. The end result is the biggest growth that's going to happen is in the southeast United States. That growth right now for Destin is 67 million people within a 1 day's drive. Cincinnati is an 8-hour drive, 8.5-hour drive, which is hard to even imagine, but with the interstate system, the road systems, what's going on, and that was driving the bus for Walt Disney, because he wanted that 1 day drive, and it's going to drive the bus on this. There is no beach better, and I think what's happened is the industry outside of Mobile hasn't really come down here yet, except there's a tremendous amount of land along the Gulf Coast where you have all these military bases, and the military breeds trained people that are all going through 2 careers, because they come out of the military, and you're going to see a huge industrial growth going on there. Right now there's $1 billion plant going up, and I don't even know what it is, which I hate to say, going up in Okaloosa County now, just north of Interstate 10.
Yeah, we've got a $4.5 billion one going in Baldwin County. So
it's going to be Katy bar the doors. We're the biggest growth area that's going to happen, because we got the Gulf, we've got easy access, we got sunshine, and I have to say we got Florida, not here, but we got Florida.
Well, 2 more questions to close with. Our audience has been great, and I've got 5 minutes for them before they get sent off to drink, so I don't want to keep them too long. But, similar to what I asked, Mr. Stimson and Billy as well, like you look back on your life, what's mattered the most,
What's mattered the most? Well, I don't have a good track record on marriage. Thank God, 30 years ago, I found the spectacular. She's right here with me.
Miss Terry.
That's Terry. But I've been married a few times, and it really was all for a lot of maybe the wrong reasons. So that's not great. My kids are obviously, everything comes back to kids. You just want to keep the family together, and that's really important. And I've got my son and my daughter both working in the company, and that's means an awful lot to me. So, and they're doing great too, which is wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, Chris has certainly become a close friend, and what an amazing story. Yeah.
Oh,
That's going to be another TED Talk one day.
Yeah,
we'll get him up here.
That's a whole nother story. He needs to tell this story.
It's amazing. All right, and then I'm going to close with this. Just as somebody who is your partner, who's somebody who thinks the world of you and loves you to death, you got one thing to leave me with. What are you going to leave me with? One piece of advice.
Oh, advice.
Yeah. Wait, I'm in the
I
will?
thought you were looking for something.
Yeah. He's like, yeah, you're on the note with me, brother. You get that when I'm done. That's joint and several. Thanks.
All right, well, I was going to leave you with a no mortgage outstanding. How's that?
I'll take it.
I think,
Thank you.
I think Nathan, you're the most people-centric person I've ever met. It's fantastic. Everything you do is focused on improving the people around you. It's emotional for me. So, yeah, just stay with it.
Well, thank you. I love you.